Yeah, I'm kind of done. Hello, everybody, and welcome, and thank you. That's quite bright. I might stand over here if that's all right. That's better. Thank you for coming and spending your Thursday evening coming to listen to me talk. So I'm here to talk about Antarctica, and so here we are in Charlotte Street in London, and it's sort of, I was going to say a hot, sunny summer's day. It's definitely not. So we're in a cinema, but I thought just to get you guys on the mood, I'll play you a little movie just to get you a little bit of an idea of what I'm going to talk to you about this evening. Okay, so Antarctica. Now we've got a little bit of a context of it. So here she is, sitting at the bottom of the world, and usually most people, it's not really part of their day-to-day thinking, and why should it be? But this is a place that I've fallen in love with and been going to for now 24 years. And it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary place. It's the highest, driest, coldest continent on Earth. It's 90% of the world's ice. It's 80% of the world's fresh water. There's 100 million birds and not a single tree. You know, there's all these fantastic stats about Antarctica that just kind of blow your mind. But what I really like about Antarctica in this map is that there's no delineations. No one owns it. And that's just probably one of the most defining and most fantastic parts of it. White Desert, we've got 140 people of 18 different nationalities. And it really sort of represents exactly kind of the way Antarctica is. No one owns it. It's governed properly. And it's a nice reminder about how humans can get on. This is obviously what the politicians would have us do, and they'd be carving it all up in all sorts of different places. So there's kind of a lot going on in Antarctica, but it's such an enormous place that there's still plenty and plenty of wilderness, and there's plenty of discovery. So I'm kind of jumped to the end, and now I'm going to rewind a little bit and tell you how I sort of got a little bit into Antarctica and got exploring. And this was a classic 23, leave university, don't know what to do, and all those things. And friends and I decided we were going to go to this place called Kyrgyzstan. We had found some mountains no one had ever climbed before. And the defining memory I have of that trip is we climbed 7 summits that we named, and that was all fantastic. And there was some technical and difficult climbing. But I just remember having no idea what we were doing. I mean, I could genuinely rank. In fact, I still can't even spell Kyrgyzstan properly. But this was the defining element. It was going somewhere new. And that was what was exciting, going somewhere completely new. And that led me to the Congo, Wales with the pygmies for a little bit, and that was hilarious. I mean, I was huge and ungainly, like a great big hippo crashing through the bush after them. But what was fabulous about these guys was their connection to wilderness. Like going through the Antarctica forest, these guys would be like, "Oh, follow the path," and I can't see anything but jungle. And these guys have got like a broken twig there and a disrupted leaf there, and just the way they were so in tune. They also were net hunting, and so we were going net hunting with them and poison darts. And they also smoked a lot of weed. So like smoking weed, poison darts, lethal, running around the rainforest. I actually today just found an old video of us getting ready for a hunt. And I am baked is the only... What could go wrong? Like tree frog poison in my bow and arrow, and off I go charging through the forest. So that was the Congo. That was kind of cool. And then I headed out to Tibet, which was really beautiful. I really enjoyed Tibet. You know, very difficult with the cultural element of what the Chinese had done with the Tibetans, which was pretty painful. But the place itself is wildly interesting. And also then into places like Suriname. Again, this was a river no one had ever been down before. And we were exploring into the, it's just Suriname is this fantastic place because the silt comes out the river. So it basically blocks up all the beaches, so there's no beaches. So you've got St. Bart's and all these very posh sort of, places in the Caribbean, like literally just down the road. But Suriname's just been left alone. And it's this most extraordinary primary rainforest. If you're into birding, I've never seen anything like it. But I did realize that having been bitten by a piranha, stung by an electric eel, so many mosquito bites, I decided that we should start exploring somewhere slightly less full of animals. And this kind of led us to going to Antarctica. And so back in 2002, we decided we were going to ski to the South Pole. We arrived in Punta Arenas and we realized we'd forgotten our skis, which was kind of like a slightly damning, slightly hard moment and pretty hard on the pride. And it was a tough trip, but we did it in 46 days. We became the youngest and fastest to ever ski to the South Pole. And my other friends went to the north and they broke the world record for skiing to the North Pole. And I went back to Antarctica to do a full traverse of the Antarctic continent. With a guy called Al Nickel, whose parents are in here tonight. And I was actually at that stage, in fact, I blame Al completely for this because I was planning on not going back to Antarctica at all, but he's a lawyer and he's pretty good at sort of manipulating people. So after about a cup of tea and about 3 hours with Al, I'd signed up completely to doing a full traverse of the Antarctic continent. So this was 80 days, 1,800 kilometers. It was a long and difficult trip. But there were, in fact, I'm going to go to another slide first. There were days like this, which is where we had complete whiteouts, where we used to call them plane days because of like after all the planning, all the preparation, after raising all the money, like in those days they're so awful that if a plane landed next to you, would you just get on the plane and leave and just go, I'm out of here, I'm done, I'm donezoed. So that was, they had days like that, but then you had days like this where you see that's Al and I crossing a place in the Axel Heiberg Glacier, which is where Amundsen went up. So we were the first people to follow Amundsen's route through this glacier. And we found a mountain that actually he'd built a little rock cairn from 100 years ago. So my point of all of this was in Antarctica, we were seeing the deep Antarctica. We were seeing the interior. Now, you could go on a cruise ship, and now, I think last year, 120,000 people went on cruise ships to the peninsula of Antarctica. So it's pretty well-trodden, parts of it. Not to say it's not special, but it's pretty well-trodden. The interior, polar explorers and scientists were going to. And I thought I really wanted to set up something that would basically be like in South Africa, where I live in Cape Town, where they've done it very well. We have like wilderness areas, but you have these really sort of luxurious camps there. And I thought, well, could we do something like that in Antarctica? So before I go into the origins of that, I got a little clip of our trip across Antarctica.
the snow is deep, our pulks are heavy, and it's very, very hard, and we're averaging about, I don't know, we'd be lucky if we do sort of 4 or 5 miles today. We've done 85 meters up, and we've got another 3,500 to go. So, yeah, I think the Transantarctic could be quite a difficult prospect.
Are they painful there?
They're not too bad. They're less painful than pulling a pulk, I think. Or probably less painful than it is for you to see me bending over like that. No, they're not too bad. I'm hoping that if I keep them plastered up, they'll be okay.
What day is it? Day 5. Does that bode well?
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking to myself. Day 6 out of 60. It's starting to get worse out there. It's actually getting quite dangerous. Oh, it's cold. It's a bit cold.
But we're going to travel tomorrow. We've only got another 1,000 million miles to go, so...
960.
Million, billion.
960 miles ago, we've done 40, and we've been here a month.
So there's a little bit of a taste of what it was like. I was actually in Mexico City doing this talk, and the lady, the agent goes, yeah, show a little bit about Antarctica. You're crossing Antarctica. Our guests will really love that. And halfway through, she was literally like, turn it off, turn it off. No one is going to Antarctica. I was like, yeah, fair enough, yeah. And all these guys are like, no way. So this is from when I was young and had hope and dark hair. Looking out in Antarctica, I very much wanted to set up this idea of bringing people into the interior who weren't polar explorers, who weren't scientists, who could really just enjoy it. So this is back in 2005, and I always think that like a business is very much like a child or a human being, and there's very different stages of a business. And so birth 2005. And I rather like the quote, if dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. Well, this definitely, we had some dreams. So we decided to hook up with these guys from Cape Town, and they'd heard about our trip across Antarctica, so they took us quite seriously. And they were running scientists on this big Russian Ilyushin jet into a place called Novozarevskaya in Antarctica. And I loved in the early days, we used to have Unknown International Airport. That was great. And I decided to set up a luxury trip, and our version of luxury was this. This is a portaloo that is strapped to the back of the plane. There'd be Boris, the Russian, just throwing a couple of sandwiches down the thing as we go along. And then Vladimir would be at the back next to the fuel tank smoking a fag. And it was just like, yeah, it was the early pioneering days. I actually, it might be the worst business plan ever devised. I basically financed 3/10 off the back of my credit card, paying 17.5% interest, to set up a little camp with this idea that if I build a camp, maybe somebody will come and visit it, very sort of field of dreams. And one of my friends, who's like a senior partner at Ashurst, which is a law firm here in London, actually took the trouble to take me out to lunch to explain to me that this was the worst idea he'd ever heard in his entire life, which I thought was very generous of him. But here are one of the 3/10 financed on the thing, and this is Paul, who I crossed Antarctica with, and me explaining my vision, and him going, I don't agree with you, I think. And in the early days, we were with the Russians, which was a lot of fun. We used to drive around in a Russian tank. Victor sort of, hit it with a hammer. We had the Russians used to overwinter, so they didn't really see women at all. So as soon as we had any women come to the camp, they would like run into the container and get fresh vegetables and anything they could find, chocolate to sort of present to the women. And it was just a very fun kind of experience. And I set up this. This is year 2, so it'd gone for this whole safari sort of vibe, very sort of Scott and Shackleton. And in those early days, we kind of attracted some quite fantastically weird people. Like this was a guy called Eric Burhans, who was, I would describe him as a functional alcoholic, who decided to go hot air ballooning. And we were like, yeah, sure, let's go. And so we hadn't really given much thought to the idea that he might drift off. And then if he did drift off, how we go and pick him up and all these kinds of things. So that was Eric. Then we had Ram, who wanted to break the world record for swimming a kilometer. And we got this Indian doctor who came, and I was like, Ram, like, how long is it going to take you to do the swim? And he goes, like he had this really weird accent. He's kind of like Israeli, South African. It was a very odd accent, but he kind of goes, yeah, it's going to take me like 25 minutes. And with this wonderful Indian doctor who's lovely, he was like, yeah, after 22 minutes, he will have a cardiac arrest. Like this. And I was like, a what? That sounds serious. He's like, yes, very serious. So this is us. We drag him into a tent where we've got these heaters going. And so Ram is there, but his skin temperature's dropped, to almost 0. So we're in there rubbing his skin, trying to warm him up. And he doesn't remember anything. He's completely, doolally from doing the swim. And so we're all getting hot. So we're now taking all our clothes off as well. So there's basically 3 men in their pants rubbing another man in his pants in a tent in Antarctica. It was kind of surreal. Then we had Bear Grylls, who was running all over the place, doing parachuting and everything else. And these are the early days. Lots of pioneering, lots of fun stuff. We made it up as we were going along, as everyone else is, leading kind of to the next stage of life of the business. And this is a nice quote. And they do keep you awake, especially as you start to realize the consequences of your actions. Now, while the camp wasn't luxurious in any sense, or the plane for that matter, we were doing amazing activities. So where we were, we discovered this whole system of insane ice crystals and ice caves with these, they're hexagonal, super fragile, but they're just the geometry of them is just phenomenal. And you can see here these whole systems. Then into the ice tunnels, which is carved out from meltwater. And these are they're absolutely beautiful. And these turn into then the Blue River, which again is these pressure ridges form. And I've never seen them anywhere else in Antarctica. They're just insane. We upgraded from the Russian tank and made friends with some wonderful Icelandics. And we had about 7 Icelandics working for us called Helga, Snorri, Gumi, Smauri, and it was like having the 7 dwarfs, constantly big beards, super smiley, who would drive us around to different locations. And then we would go exploring and going into these beautiful mountains. Ken, who's here tonight, came to one of these mountains back in 2008-9, as we discussed. And some of it was pretty extreme. Some of it was very, very beautiful. I mean, this is actually a photo from recently where we've discovered a whole mountain range, which is really close to the camp. I mean, this is about 3,500 feet of a vertical wall. It's like having Yosemite on your doorstep, and probably 30 people have ever been there. It's extraordinary. Just whether to climb it, which is pretty technical, but just to ski tour through here, just the most beautiful, beautiful landscape. And surreal. The other thing we had on our doorstep were the penguins. So, and a lot of them. So 28,000 penguins. This is where Sir David Attenborough shot his last thing. In fact, I don't know whether anyone saw that one of the little penguins jumping off the cliff. Nat Geo did that. It's been sort of doing the YouTubes. That was all shot here. And penguins are, I mean, the emperors, I'm sure many of you guys know their story. But because we fly in, we can get in really early. So the cruise ships have to come in when the ice breaks up much later. We can come in really early. And they're just amazing. They're just amazing, amazing animals. They are so insanely beautiful. And I keep learning more things about them. So we had a professor of penguins just come, and you kind of go, I know quite a lot about penguins because I've spent a lot of time there. And then she was then explaining how she said, like, why do you think they ruffle up their feathers? And I was like, well, it's to trap air in there, right, to keep them warm for insulation. She's like, yeah, that's true. But more than that, when they get into the water, the adults squirt out the air, and this creates a air bubble around them. So it's basically like a turbo through the water, so they can go 2.5 times quicker to catch fish. Like, how did somebody evolve that? It's just the most extraordinary, extraordinary thing. And when you see them, if you take your sunglasses off, because we've all got those sunnies that are, glare. If you take them off, when they ruffle up their feathers, they literally shimmer. And they're about this big. They're completely unafraid of you. So they sometimes, we've obviously got to try and keep a distance from them. But I was taking a photograph the other day, and like one just came up and just like pinched my bum. And I was like, hello, buddy. And they just to have an animal that's completely unafraid of you is just a really wonderful thing. This photo we named Bow to Your Emperor. So we also get some Weddell seal around where we are. They come up and they're amazing because they have to keep this blowhole open. So most seals live for like 40 years. These guys, I think, live for about 20 because they're constantly scraping the hole of the blowhole to keep it open. And then they have their harem of ladies that are with them, and it's all very sort of protective of the male to keep his women. It's a whole dynamic that's going on. But they're amazing animals. And the other thing that we were really interested in was the South Pole. So here we are at 90 degrees south. I'd now at this stage skied there twice and was looking for probably a slightly easier way to get there this time. And while the South Pole's an interesting one because on one level it's the same patch of snow that everything else is. On the other, it's a place with no more east, south, or west. The only direction is north on the planet. We had some Saudi royals come, and they had to pray to Mecca, and I was literally like, I honestly, no, I was just like, that way. Yeah. So I probably caused a bit of a problem there. But it is a surreal place to go to. It's still an incredibly difficult place to go to. I think more people have climbed Everest in a day than have ever skied to the South Pole. So it's still, it's just a very, very hard place to get to. And when you start to understand the dynamics and the geography about it, you realize the scale. This is a skiway that we built at 83 degrees south. And there you get an appreciation of just how absolutely vast Antarctica is. The fun fact about this place is that your nearest neighbor is the International Space Station. And we had to do a sort of Carlsberg probably just in case somebody got legal on us. So now we're growing up. We're becoming an adolescent. We're getting to know what we're doing. And this was largely due to, I mean, we were working with this Russian outfit. They were a monopoly. And monopolies always go sort of one way. And the prices started changing and all that stuff. And so I decided to go. I'd heard these rumors about this runway that used to exist 25 years ago. And I found this book in this, funnily enough, as we were just talking about Burnham Market, I was in Norfolk, I found this book by this chef that used to work at this runway. But none of the pilots, they'd heard their story, somebody knew someone. And so I took a plane and started flying around and having a look. And found this place, which was formerly called Blue One, back in like 1997. And we landed the plane and found this cache of gear that had been there for like 25 years. There were 2 skidoos sitting outside on the snow. We got them working. And this is us plotting away, trying to work out from the satellite mapping what's what and where the crevasse fields are. And we did this whole sort of surveying. And meanwhile, the other lads were going through the cache, and they found 2 bottles of whiskey. Lagavulin, 16-year-old malt, still absolutely perfect. And they were like, let's drink it. And I was like, no. So it got signed, and one went to London with a friend of mine, Tom, and then I kept the other one. And 3 years later, we said on the first ever private jet landing, we would drink them. So this was the first ever jet landing, Gulfstream 550. and that was persuading a pilot called Nuno, who is Portuguese. Sorry, not Portuguese. He's from Mongolia and speaks Portuguese, and trying to explain to Nuno the different types of snow: falling snow, drifting snow, dry snow, wet snow. And so it was just like complete. It's just the like hardest conversations ever. We're all doing this because obviously first ever flight. And this kind of was a really interesting part of White Desert's evolution, because now we were starting to be independent. We broke free of the Russians. We now had our own runway. And it's like cosmically difficult to have your own runway. There's only about, I think, 8 or 9 of them. Big countries don't have their own runway, like China and Germany. And, you know, like lots of these big nations don't have their own runways. But we've happened across this one spot that was this perfect place to set up and build a runway. So now we had our G550 going backwards and forwards. We had luxury in terms of the plane. But we also had to get fuel around. And that was a whole nother thing. So here we are, we've sort of like the genie was out the bottle. Now we've got to start like supporting all these logistics. And we had to come in from the coast. And so now this was doing a journey across these crevasse fields of 600 kilometers. So this, we had a brilliant Russian team. Skipper runs the team, and they are just as hard as nails. And they travel for 10 kilometers an hour, day after day, delivering fuel. And they even go up to Dixie's camp. So that takes them 40 days driving at 10 kilometers an hour every single day. And we had a new guy join the team just this year, and he's a young guy. And I said, so Vlad, what makes you think you're going to be right for this team? And he goes, I've just driven from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg. And I was like, that's like 8 time zones. That's like 6,000 kilometers. He goes, yeah. I said, how long did it take you? He goes, I do it in 1 week. Like this. And I was like, geez, on a motorbike. And he was like, oh my God. And he, how was it? He goes, first 3 days it rained. No problem. Like this. And you're just like, okay, you're exactly the right guy for my team. So these guys cross crevasse fields and they delivered the fuel. And you can see here a little bit of what it's like.
Some of those look to be about 5 metres wide.
Yeah, it's a tough job. So now we're sort of moving into the White Desert is now nearly 20 years old, and so after that, it was. I like this quote because it's kind of like going back to my lawyer friend who said it's such a bad idea. It's like it's been fun pioneering and sort of making stuff that people didn't necessarily know that they wanted. So now we have an infrastructure that's from 5 hours from Cape Town. We take about 250 scientists in each year and take them to their bases. We take about 250 clients, but in groups of 12. So our 2 camps are set up for 12 people. And the runway, from being quite, what's the word, with Nuno flying a little bit more cavalier, or with the Aleutian, has become quite grown up. And so this is what it takes to build the runway. what I particularly like about that movie is you see the Airbus coming in, of which there's two things. One, I was standing with Ryan at the runway this season, and when that thing comes into land weighing 400,000 pounds and moving at about 200 knots, it doesn't matter how many times we've done it, it still is like this unbelievable sight. And Ryan just turns to me and just goes, "Oh man, this never gets old." Like that, as you see this thing come down. What I liked about it was that in the video, after 3 years of planning, that's the largest plane that's ever landed in Antarctica on ice. After 3 years of planning, if you notice, the steps had 2 little wooden blocks, because some idiot had made the steps too short. So it's like we've done all these calculations in every single thing. Some idiot needs it. We've corrected that. We now have decent steps. So we've got our air bridge and we can get in. So the bit that we've spent the years changing and upgrading is our camps. So again, set up for 12 people. So-called which way, because when I first got here, I got lost and didn't know which way to go. And again, it's like to build something where we have these beautiful rooms. It's really comfortable. There's a sauna and amazing food, and all the money is on the logistics. You know, all the money is in the planes and the fuel. So to create a camp that's beautiful and comfortable and a place people can relax in is super important. And when I've been bad, I demote myself to waiter as well. So that's which way. And then we also had fun building ice bars as well. So we've developed these fantastic ice bars with games rooms and been having a lot of fun with that. And then a couple of years ago, well, not a couple, we had probably about 5 years ago, we had Buzz Aldrin come in, the astronaut. And he's a very interesting character, as you would probably imagine. Like sitting around the dinner table, there's just like all these astrophysicists talking about how you go to Mars. And I was just sitting there just trying to keep up with the conversation and listening. But one of the comments, this is us with Buzz, one of the comments was, he was like, "This place looks like the surface of the moon." And it looks really surreal and just like, and this camp is all sort of like looking back and old school. But we decided that we'd build a new camp called Echo. And Echo Base, I was really into Star Wars as a kid. And so had great fun building and completely designing this whole new camp, which everything's bespoke. But the whole idea of this was that we wanted these huge windows so you always feel connected to the outside. So you always have that real connection with yourself and the wilderness. And that's probably the defining part of what we do in Antarctica, is we don't have mobile phones. People actually connect with the environment they're in, but they can do so without being sort of a polar explorer. So this camp was, we've had great fun building, and that's our newest product. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a video, tiny little bit about the trip in a hole, and then I will stop talking. So to end up, just to say thank you all for listening. It's funny watching those things. It's after 20 years. I think I'd probably be a bit more jaded about my job, or a little bit more blasé, or those kinds of words. But it's not. Every single time I land in Antarctica, there's something new. These videos just remind me of how much more there is to do. So I don't know where we're going to go with White Desert, but we're going to keep pushing and doing new stuff, and I'll maybe see you down there sometime. Thanks, guys. Any questions for Patrick? Yeah.
You've traversed Antarctica, which in itself is an amazing feat.
Thank you.
But on reflection, when you were doing it, how did you reflect on what Shackleton achieved in what he did at the time?
It's really hard to compare trips, and it is hard. On the one hand, the journey is still the same. We've got to cover the same distance. Our skis aren't that different. We've still got to pull heavy sleds and all this. The differences are things like, our clothing is so much better. It's lighter. Our nutrition's better. So we also can have a sat phone call and probably get evacuated within a week. They're down there for like 2 years. So there's a whole sense of the unknown. But there's still lots of very tangible elements to it. So it's very hard. It's very hard to reflect on my journey versus his, because they're very different. And he had lots of other disasters that befell him, which meant that he had to manage unbelievably difficult situations and be an amazing leader. We just kind of got on with our thing. He had to get to Elephant Island, and he had to launch the James Caird and do all these. So his is far more a story of leadership and survival and holding your shit together when it all goes really wrong. Ours had the potential to go wrong in so many ways, and nearly did. We just kind of skinned through it. So I don't know. We talked about it a lot. I could probably talk about it for hours. But there's lots of ways I wouldn't compare ourselves at all in terms of like the journeys, and there's lots of other ways that I think there's actually quite some similarities. Does that answer the question at all? Kind of.
Yeah.
A little bit. Sorry. Yeah. Sure.
You mentioned crevasses. Are there very many?
Yeah. Lots and lots and lots. Very much so. So moving glacier. So Witcherway, for instance, is very safe because you're on the rocks, and then actually we know where they are very easily. When you're around Echo, we have designated areas that we work with. We've got Elvira, who is a Russian scientist with our ground penetrating radar. So any routes that we're walking on, we've surveyed. And then areas that we don't know, we're roped up. We've got amazing high mountain guides from Chamonix, who are all UIGM certified guides, and we rope up and we do the whole thing. So they're definitely a concern for vehicles, for sure. But a lot of the times with guests, they're not driving over new areas. Yeah.
I don't know if I am wrong, but I read a book a few days ago that says that Antarctica is as big as South America.
I know it's bigger than Australia, and I know it's bigger than America, as in North America. South America, I don't know, I'm afraid.
To have an idea of what we're talking about. And the other thing that surprises me is that there is no life on Earth. Zero life. All of the life is depending on the sea.
It is. Where we are at Wolfsfang, we're about 300 kilometers inland. And what I love about you saying there's no life, well, there's stuff like there's lichens and stuff that are there, which is like, oh my God, this, okay. We also have snow petrels, which are these amazing white birds that go out in storms. They're extraordinary. So in the middle of a storm, you'll see a snow petrel doing like acrobatics. They look like kind of angels. And they nest in the rocks, just in these little holes. So even in the most isolated place where we are, I think it's the opposite. Life finds a way. And you've got these incredible birds that actually vomit to create the barriers around them, this like waxy vomit to seal themselves in so they can have these little nests to think. And then, anyway, it's extraordinary.
And as I see, I understand that the
The where? Sorry.
The average altitude is 700, 500 feet,
Yes.
which is, I am from Chile, and that's normally what we have as a level in our icy fields, the North and South Pole. That's quite high.
Super high. Well, when we fly to the South Pole, we go from, so our runway is at 1,000 meters, so 3,000 feet. When we fly to the South Pole, we go up to about 3,500 feet. Meters. So like 10,000 feet. And even in parts of the high polar plateau, it's actually up to about 4,600 meters. So that's the height of Mont Blanc. So the plateau, there are areas huge, absolutely huge. And that's that photo I showed of being at Dixie's camp. You know, you've got this insane, but you're at 3,000 meters. You're standing on 3,000 meters of ice. It's extraordinary. Yeah. I'm actually just planning a trip through South America right now and coming into all sorts of problems. Who knew the Andes were that high? It's like who knew? Like they're huge.
The Andes are in Antarctica, by the way. They go through.
Yeah, all the way up. No, so we're planning a trip through South America in September, like a recce, because our planes, the Baslers, those propeller planes, they have to come from North America, and they come all the way through North America, Central, then South America. So we're doing some trips where we're going to link up and use those planes, and we're going to go to the west side of the Andes on one trip, and then on the way up, we're going to go to the east side, which I'm really looking forward to. So I'm really looking forward to exploring Chile. Yeah.
When you have guests come to stay with you, typically how long do they stay, and what would be the routine that they go through during their stays with you?
So we've got it's a 7-8 day trip, and then a 2-day journey to the South Pole, 1-day journey to the Emperor Penguins. So that's sort of 3 of your 8 days. And then the other days are basically dependent on weather, but we get good weather. I mean, Charlie was there and we didn't have a breath of wind. He was literally like, why did I bring my down jacket? You know, it's like, so then you pick and choose. So we have 17 staff for 12 guests. So basically we split up each day usually. And some people want to do quite hardcore stuff and go ice climbing and rock climbing. Other people will get in the cars and we'll go and have a picnic on a beautiful view. So we go to the science bases, or depending very much on what the clients want to do. Yeah, it's busy. Sorry.
How did you train to go across Antarctica?
I pulled lots of tires around Hyde Park, which was super weird. In fact, I remember really clearly the Queen driving past in her motorcade and sort of looking out the window like that at us as we were pulling these sleds. Yeah, pulling sleds, basically pulling weights from your hips, and it's all about it's time, in terms of anyone can kind of do it for a week, but we're doing it for 80 days. And I started off at like 83 kilos, and by the time I got to the South Pole, I was like 67 kilos. So you can't eat enough food. So there's a whole sort of attrition rate, and everyone thinks that being a polar explorer is all sort of macho and tough. It's the antithesis. Like each night you're trying to preserve yourself, darning your socks and the whole thing. So it's all about preserving, and then at the end, then when you feel you've got enough reserve, you can kind of sprint. Like I think we did 42 hours non-stop to reach the South Pole at the end, and because we felt we had enough reserves. And that's to do with the training. But I mean, in terms of preparation, lots of people ate loads of food, so they're kind of like a polar bear mentality. But for me, that was just carrying the same amount of weight on your belly. So there's lots of different schools of thought on it. But pull lots of tires, basically. So.
Throughout the time of going backwards and forwards, have you noticed appreciable changes due to the climate change? Do you notice retreats of the ice?
Yeah, very much. So on the peninsula is further north, so they're getting far more of it. They're like sort of the vanguard of it. Where we are in eastern Antarctica, we've got these huge ice caps, so we see a lot less. Right by Witchaway Camp, yes, you can see some of that. I think that we do see spikes. Like we had a temperature of like +7 degrees, and everyone's like, "What? Just this madness." So. Yeah, I think for us it's more about unstable weather conditions. So we're getting more storms, and we're getting the precipitation on the coast is creating mist and higher winds and these storm systems. rather than sort of the classic glacier from like the Alps retreating. Yeah. Yeah, but there's a lot of all the scientists that we bring in. They're doing a lot of ice core sampling, and they do all of that stuff. Yeah, Madam.
The complexities logistically are enormous. And I'm just thinking, how do you juggle complying with the Antarctic Treaty with running such a business, basically, down there?
Well, I would say how, in terms of the Antarctic Treaty, which obviously it's a vast treaty and all that. Did you mean by the how we operate in terms of ownership?
I mean, there must be diplomatically quite walking a bit of a tightrope.
Well, it's fortunately, actually, weirdly, it's like I imagine if you operate anywhere else, you have the sort of local government or local, Charlie up, whatever it may be in Canada, you're going to have all these regulations. We're permitted by the British Foreign Office, and it's an environmental permit. So ours is all about the environment, really. Obviously, it's got to be safe, so we can't do stupid and reckless things. But it's all about how we interact and have a minor impact on the environment we work in. And that is the sort of premise of it. So it's not really to say whether we make money or it's commercial or, sorry.
A lot of scientists to do stuff.
Yeah.
Scientists too, is that right?
Yeah, we deliver a lot of scientists. So we deliver most of BAS to Halley Station, the Germans to Neumayer, to all these different stations. So we do a lot of that for they use our logistics to fly in. But also, the whole sort of original argument with that was like, should tourists go into the interior of Antarctica? Should it just be a preserve for scientists? And that's a whole interesting debate, in the sense that I very much believe, obviously, that they should. And the reason being is that I think it's really important that rich and powerful people go and see the interior of Antarctica and they give a damn about it, and then they come out of Antarctica and they have a frame of reference and they actually care about it. I think that's really important. And then also going into science bases, it's really important for tourists to keep a check on what's going on. Attenborough said something along the lines of, you can't ever protect something unless you've experienced it, and you're not going to love something you haven't experienced. And I think there's something really true in that. So I think tourism is a really powerful force for good, as long as it's done with a very light footprint and done well. So that's kind of how we interact with the treaty. But the treaty is an extraordinary thing, it's by consensus of all the different nations there.
And just one thing on that, Patrick. You have to take everything out that goes in, don't you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's some brilliant stats. For a single poo in Antarctica, it costs us $5.60 because we have to remove the waste from Antarctica. A can of Coke costs us $38.6 to bring into Antarctica. That's what it costs us. So, we had to design all the camps so they had no foundation. So when White Desert finishes, we can remove everything without a trace. We use sustainable aviation fuel. We have entire solar arrays that have come in. And there's some really nice bits where tourism and commercial entities can sort of push the governments in terms of, like, we're bringing in a hydrogen project this year. There's lots of stuff that we're doing, which, like, we're the first people to ever use sustainable aviation fuel. So there's all sorts of ways that we're kind of pushing the envelope and hoping that the governments will sort of catch up and change the way they interact with Antarctica.
Just something about the fuel. You seem to have to go to great lengths to bring in fuel.
Yes.
Why can't you fly it in? Or is that
So we do, is the short answer. So it's 4,200 kilometers from Cape Town into Antarctica. So the reason why we've got such a big aircraft is, one is we have scientists on board and we bring in cargo for the scientists. We have our tourism camps, 12, 12 and 12. But then we also defuel the aircraft. So we're the first people to do this, where we plug into the wings and we take fuel out of the aircraft itself. But we can only bring in about, it depends on the payload, but about sort of 15,000 litres per rotation. So it's not, the distance from Cape Town into Antarctica is vast. And like lots of planes, that's a A340-300. It's designed to fly for like 12 hours from London to, Cape Town. So we have a really big aircraft to do that.
just a related point on the runways? You said it's like very few people have runways. Is that just because there isn't enough flat ground in Antarctica? I mean, what is it that's stopping other people building new runways?
It's stupidly complicated in terms of the logistics, and it's like, so first of all you've got to find a patch of ice. So it's got to be, most of Antarctica is covered in snow, even though there's ice underneath. So you've got to find either a really windy space which blows the snow off, so that's no good because it's super windy, or you need an ablation zone so it evaporates off. So we've got an ablation zone, but then you can't have any crevassing in a 3-kilometer stretch, and then it's got to be perfectly flat. So to find a site is incredibly difficult, and then you need the resources to go and fly around and look for a site, and then you also need to know how to create the friction. So it's all very well landing on ice, but you need to know how to basically create, how we treat the ice to create this friction for the plane to land. And that's a bit of a dark art and quite closely guarded secrets as to how you do that. And it makes a big difference. You know, it's obviously trying to explain to a pilot that it's not just ice. You know, that they're not going to just keep going. Is quite a thing. So.
Do you offer a 1-week express trip?
What's the express bit? Yeah, we do. That's our trips, 1-week trips. That's what we do.
From Cape Town?
Yeah, from Cape Town. Yeah, so.
Punta Arenas?
Not from Punta, I'm afraid. You can actually fly from Punta. Weirdly, Punta Arenas or Ushuaia is exactly the same distance as Cape Town is. It's literally by 50 kilometers. So we do have clients occasionally, if you've got your own jet, fly from Punta to Antarctica. Yeah. Sorry.
What time of year do you do this?
Yeah.
And how much does it cost?
Yeah, sure. So we basically everyone comes in early summer. So the summer season kind of switches up in about like the 25th of October, that sort of time. All our team come in, build all the camps, get everything ready, and then we have clients that go back to back from December and January, which are the best summer months. And then February we start to close everything down, and by the sort of 20th of February, all packed up, everything's closed, and we're out. In terms of what it costs, it's $105,000 for a week or 8 days, and that's the South Pole and Emperor trip. And then we also do a trip which is $60,000 to go and see the Emperor penguins, which doesn't have the South Pole. Getting to the South Pole is just enormously complicated and difficult.
And how much training would you need to do that?
To do our regular trips, none. Would be the answer. So I brought in my 6-year-old boy and my 8-year-old daughter. I was trying to get them actually when my son was smaller than a penguin. That was my plan, but he grew like that much. So and we, you know, Buzz Aldrin was 83 when he came. So I think that the fitter people are, the more we can kind of do with them. But that's not. It's sort of also how people interact with Antarctica. Some people want to be super energetic and ice climbing, doing everything. Others, it's a nice hike and it's a beautiful view, and it's so we get a lot of different variants. But you don't need to be, you know, tough marathon runner, but you might be one as well. So.
Can you just explain the daylight hours and the temperature? I think you just said 7 degrees high.
Where we are at like Witchaway, you get 24 hours sunshine. But it does sort of just go along the horizon for a little bit not the horizon, it dips below the mountain for a little bit for like 2 hours. But it's bright, it's like 24 hours sun. And the temperature there is about -2 degrees centigrade, which is really, and it's a desert, so it's super dry. We get wind, you know, it's more about the wind. Echo is a little bit colder, it's like -5 to -8. But again, you know, like we're wearing down and it's really not bad. Where it gets cold is when we go to the high polar plateau, to the South Pole. So that period we get these big down trousers, which are really flattering, and big down jackets and stuff. We've also got a little softer in our old age, and we have electrically heated like thermals and stuff like that. So bring in the technology. And it's at the beginning I was like, don't be ridiculous. And I was like, oh my God, that feels amazing. It's like, well, like heli skiing, the socks, so the electrically heated socks and the boots and stuff is fantastic. Yeah. So I think that's where it's like minus. Depends. Like worst would be -28, and best would be like -17 when we go to the South Pole. Yeah.
Presumably, those that want to go swimming, the water's a bit fresh.
Bit parky. Yeah. Yeah.
is it fairly?
Yeah, well, when we opened up Echo, we sort of doubled our inventory of that. So, I mean, we'll be fully booked this year. And we take probably, I'm trying to think, probably 30 trips in total of 12 people. So I didn't want to build any more pods and make it bigger in terms of the camps. I wanted to keep it really small. And I like the sort of serendipity of, with 12 people, you can go off and explore and split up and have that real sort of sense of, I want people to, have their time where they can really feel isolated. So, yeah, we keep it small, and we'll be full this year. We've got some spaces, but we'll probably by November we'll sell out. Yeah.
I think we're all on a mailing list of pure fans. I was expecting loads of skiing videos and things like that. There's nothing. Yeah, it's cross-country skiing.
Cross-country. So the bit that, from a skiing point of view, our mountains are like this. They're like flat, and then this. So they'd be terrifying to ski. We do a lot of kite skiing, which is a whole nother thing. You've got to obviously know how to kite. But the ski touring is beautiful. Like to ski touring with things around through those mountain peaks with those spires and stuff is just, and then camping out is really exciting. It's beautiful, but not obviously no tree run in Galena.
Have you been there then?
I went to the Bugaboos, and I was saying to Charlie, just like heli skiing ruined me, because I sort of went back to Courchevel and was like, this is rubbish. Yeah, it's like, so like we all feel it's just like, oh,
You have to go to Galena. You haven't experienced it yet.
I'm hoping.
Just on a lighter note, how in God's name did you forget your skis?
Yeah. Surprisingly easy, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did you just leave them in the house?
Yeah.
You didn't bring them?
Yeah, just
oh my God.
Yeah, it was, oh my God. It was literally like a checklist of like, we had everything, and it was just like, skis. Yeah, and not easy to buy them in Punta Arenas. They don't have a lot of, the ski shop is rubbish there, yeah. So they're not the super thin skating skis. They're basically ski randonnée skis. Does that make sense to you? Like, the lighter weight ski touring, and then we have different bindings and different boots. But then we have a kicker skin. So rather than a full length skin, that's too much friction. You have basically a small strip just underneath your. So it makes a big difference if you can ski, and I mean like Norwegian type skiing. Like the sort of British mentality is a little bit like, I'll just walk there and like not bother about learning the skiing rubbish, sort of Scots sort of style. And actually, you get so much more glide and so much more efficiency if you can just kind of get that little extra 10%. So. Yeah, but then when we were kiting, we'd often break skis. That's wild, and then we needed a different setup for that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Patrick, any more questions?
Thank you, guys.
But I think we're gonna retire upstairs. The bar's gonna be open. So any other questions and queries? Patrick's not going anywhere. So
Not going anywhere. It sounds really ominous.
for the moment. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, man.
So many amazing memories.
Yeah.